Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dr. Gary Salyer, who's going to talk to us about love and how much it's influenced in our childhood. It's also a lot more than just love, and he shares some great stories. So stay tuned. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Henry Miller. We create our fate every day. Most of the ills we suffer from are directly traceable to our own behavior. You know what else is directly traceable to our own behavior? Success. And these are the things we're going to focus on today, is some of those behaviors and where they come from. The theme for today's show is spirituality. It's that connection to the universe. I have a business client who actually wanted an outcome, and he made it clear that that's what he wanted, and we were going to work towards it, and he got it. And he didn't get it the way he wanted. And literally, it wasn't at all expected. But the universe literally delivered to him the outcome he asked for. Now, you probably don't think about this as spirituality, but it is. It's our connection to the universe. We don't always get what we want, but we do get what we need. And sometimes we have to learn to accept that. Today's topic is about love. And I think it's important because when it comes to money, divorce will take half your money away, and it can dramatically shift your ability to achieve financial freedom, not to mention the years of disruptions it causes as you separate. Make sure you take the time to ensure this doesn't happen. It takes effort and practice, and we've got to overcome ourselves. Our guest knows this well. After Dr. Gary Salyer's first divorce, he avowed that his next marriage would be different. So when his second marriage crumbled almost a decade later, for nearly the same reasons, he was devastated. He felt like an utter, complete failure. But rather than give in, he was determined to find another way. He committed to not being that guy who bounced from marriage to marriage, never really learning anything. So he dedicated himself to doing the deep research about all things love. He read, researched, furthered his education in the field, talked to experts, and to the people he loved. Most of all, he did the deep transformation work that unlocked his heart and released his soul to love as he had always imagined. Love and how we make it lasting became his life's highest calling, not just for himself, but for others. In doing so, he has developed a powerful and effective methodology to make it safe to love again for those who may have even given up hope on this subject, and for those who want to improve their relationships. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Gary Salyer. It's great to have you join us today.
It's nice being here, Rocky. Thank you for having me.
And I'm excited to have you join us to talk about love. But before we do that, let's get started at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
The one thing I knew about money, there was way more month than there was ever money around, put it that way. And to be honest with you, I can remember being homeless with my mother when I was little, driving around in the back seat. I remember once I was sick, and I just remember her driving around, and I could hear her crying at 3 or 4 in the morning. I do understand what it's like to grow up poor. And one of the things my mother was, I think the biggest, when I worked on my stuff with money, and most people's issues do go back to money, my mother was also alcoholic. That's how she learned to deal with many things in her life. And there was this imprint when I was like 11, 12. She said that if I took out the trash every week, that I would get a buck allowance. And I got that allowance one time in the first year. And when it got to be over $50 in arrears, I made up the belief that you don't have to pay attention to money. It's not going to show up anyway.
Interesting.
So there was this part of me that was very laissez-faire about money rather than very intentional. It was just kind of too painful to be intentional and keep racking up that scorecard of grievances, right? And that was one of the things I had to correct, is it's okay to look at money, and it's okay to expect money to show up. It's okay to know your value. There was a real thing of unworthiness there. I could say of all of the imprints, that seemed to be the one that made the most impression on me when I was around 11 or so.
And most of our money imprints seem to come between about 5 and 13. So you were inside of that zone. And how did you get over that imprint?
I learned it later in life after I started doing the work that led to the book I wrote. One day I just decided to work on money with the guy that was training me. And I realized if love is limited, there's probably a few other things limited too. And sure enough, one of the things I realized is I not only wanted more love in my life, I wanted more money and I wanted more success. My emphasis, my life's work was love. But as you well know, to have influence, to have effect, to get a message out, it takes this commodity, green stuff, or digital these days, nevertheless.
It does. It's a tool that helps us to achieve our dreams and live our life.
It is. And these days, for me, money is an expression of my soul. It's a tool of expressing my soul's purpose in the world. The more of it, the more I can get my soul's message out. And that changes things for me. When you see the soul expressing itself materially through money and then what you can do with money. It's a very different relationship than how do I earn it and how will I not get it? Right?
And that's something that we all have to work on. We need to be intentional. What are those scripts that are kind of running in the background and that were created in our childhood? And then being intentional about changing them to the scripts that we want to live in our life and changing that relationship with ourselves. And then we can do that. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about that with regards to love today.
We will. Absolutely.
I read in the book that you took a test in college that showed something like a 90% chance you would get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
What was this test that could tell that?
I don't even remember which one it was. I remember it was my senior year in college. I had gone to school because at 7, I noticed everybody was miserable in the family. And I said, I will never be divorced. And I went, and being the first person in 7 generations to graduate from from high school, I was the first to go to college. And my intent was to make sure I never got a divorce, psychology and religion. And my senior year, good old Dr. Farman dropped me in and said, hey, I got this personality test. It might have been, I don't know, it was the Minnesota Monophasic Inventory or what, but it was a very large and probably standardized personality test. And he goes over all the results with me 2 days later. I remember it being about 2 p.m. of a Thursday afternoon. Then as I'm walking out of his office, he says, oh, by the way, you have a 90% chance of a divorce. And it was like grenades going off in my ears. What do you mean 90%? And I went back 2 hours later to the dean of instructions. I'm not graduating. And he goes, what do you mean? You got enough hours? I said, I'm not graduating, told him what I was doing. And I went a fifth year of college just to get another degree in marriage and family. That's how much it impressed me. And then, of course, the big surprise was after doing all that to stave off a divorce from a family, there were 90% odds. 12 years later, the statistic came true.
And that's a shame. Let's dig into that a little bit further. But before we do, what else can personality tests tell us with reasonable accuracy?
Oh, there's a lot of standardized tests that have pretty predictive value of things. We now know that. Okay. They can tell you, some psych tests can tell you, where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. You have certain tests like I said, the MMPI that I mentioned. And, it's highly predictive of when there's mental illness. But, for those of us with just normal middle class craziness, labels and trying to tell you who you are isn't as important as really helping to reset. It's more descriptive, but it's not prescriptive. So while sometimes, when I'm working with couples, there's a few that I sometimes will give people, maybe to find out how committed they are, how much they've got one foot out the door. There's a few like that, and you can get a lot of really good information quick. But information is not the same as transformation now, is it?
No, it's not. And we'll talk about transformation later, because that is essentially what everybody needs and wants is transformation.
Yes.
You did all this work. You studied, right? You're a doctor in this area, and yet you got divorced. What happened?
You have to think about it. This relates to what I said in the book. I mean, what happened was when I was little, my mother had borderline personality disorder. And one of the things I talk about in the book is this whole thing about you have to get it right as a child to separate and belong, that it feels good belonging, that there's a me and a protective, empowering we. Well, when you have an alcoholic mother who's also mentally ill, there was such violence in that we. You didn't want to be a part of it. You wanted to be separate. It was way better to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I mean, and in order to get to college, that's exactly what I had to do, even. So it felt more comfortable being a me than a we, to pull back, to have separation. And so that was the default setting. Remember the last time I was in a we, and that was running at 4. But when you're married and you're 30 and some part is still trying to be distant, and your wife says, I feel lonely in this relationship. And, it doesn't make any sense because I really loved her. But there was also a part of me that I could not see. I would do distancing moves because that was the brand of safety I learned as a child. Way better to be a me than a we. So some part of me, pulled me out of that marriage as a way of saving me from all the perils of being a we and that old safety setting. And so what happened was really the part of my brain that said the best deal available is to pull away and to make sure you're me did a beautiful job of protecting the 4-year-old by making sure the 30-year-old did the same thing. And that's why I say in the book that a lot of these things that get between us and love are old security patternings, security memos, and the brain never got a memo to say it should expire at 18 or 22. And they keep rolling, and then we wonder why love doesn't work. It's because some part is trying to save the little one from an old past bad deal. And our brains always take the best deal available. They're just not always the best deal later on.
And so I've been told that the subconscious mind, the whole purpose of it is to keep us safe. So it's not there to make us happy and make us in love. It's designed for safety. And it sounds like in this case, that's what happened. It kept you safe and protected. And I've also been told that the subconscious mind doesn't understand age in the sense of, like you're talking about, there's no expiration date. It's that number doesn't seem to make sense to the subconscious mind. I don't know if that's true. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. The part of your brain that's doing, and that's important, that's running safety is an old reptile brain. It's 350 million years old, has the same, and if you look at your brain and the reptile part of your brain, it's got the same DNA as your backyard lizard. Now, I call it your guardian angel with an IQ of 10 because nobody's going to confuse any backyard lizard with Einstein anytime soon. That part of your brain has two kind of bugs. One, there's no sense of time. Everything is now. And the other thing is it can only work on association. And it can't do comparison. What it can't do is better than. And the reptile part of your brain doesn't even have feelings. So what it does is it makes a list of survivable things and it wants to have those experiences again. And its only criteria is breathing. Did I breathe through it? So that's really great if you breathe through having been welcomed into the world and you're worthy of having your needs and you're cherished and you're empowered, the 4 feelings that tell you you're loved. But the bug in the program is if you were unwelcomed or unworthy or uncherished or disempowered or abused or whatever it is, it will associate those feeling states and those conditions with survival. And we'll go, how can I have that again? Because that's what we can breathe through. If the part of you that's much later, the part that says, hi, I'm Rocky, that part of the brain is 4 million years old. It goes to a therapist. That part of the brain says, wait a minute. I think the neighbors are up to something, and we may not be able to breathe through that something. So it always keeps having the same experience. It also runs attraction, which is why people keep getting attracted to the same Mr. and Ms. Wrong. The brain is seeking old survival. And if that is always timeless. And the key in the work that I do is I upgrade those safety patterns. I find the exact flavor of safety the brain was once seeking and then upgrade it so that love can be lasting.
So how do you upgrade a pattern?
Well, first off, you have to be in deep rapport. There's these patterns were at one time the best deal available. So nobody is wrong, Rocky. There was a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I was speaking at an event and a friend had read the book and she called over another friend, says, oh, come over here. Dr. Gary over here has written a book. And as soon as she says it was called Safe to Love Again, this woman literally got white as a sheet, took a step back and go, oh no, not another book that tells me how wrong I am. There's nobody wrong because at one point in time, your brain only pulls back from loving, certain experiences because it was the best deal available. It wasn't a good deal for me to be involved with a we. I could have been killed when she got. So, if it's not safe to reach out, then the brain pulls that off. So the key is to go and find the exact flavor of safety that someone is seeking. And then to find out what these core missing feelings are that I say you need to have work and to have love. And if you can add that, the really good feeling of welcomed or worthy or cherished and empowered, plus the exact sense of safety the brain needs to feel safe being welcomed, safe being worthy, then things shift. Then the brain says, it's a good deal. It's a better deal to feel cherished. Or whatever the feeling is. That's how it is. And now there's some techniques that are more technical than we want to get involved with on a podcast, but essentially it's going back and adding resources and safety and feelings, not just thoughts, not just labels, not just stories, but feelings. And if that happens, miracles can happen in terms of people's relationships.
And that's amazing. So let's kind of take a step back to childhood, because I know in the beginning of the book, you talk a lot about that. And as I read through it, I'm like, this is almost like a parenting book, because if parents knew this, they would treat their kids differently. So one of the things that jumped out up front was, I think it was Dr. Bowlby. He ran, or was a doctor in a British orphanage.
Dr. Bowlby?
Bowlby, yes. What he noticed was that babies who had lost their parents were dying unexpectedly, even though they had warmth and people around them and support. What was that all about?
Well, what it's all about is the father of what's called attachment theory, the science of how our brains are wired to love and be loved. And Bowlby noticed that having the list of all these physical things weren't enough. And the reason he knew that, the reason I think Bowlby knew that comes from his own childhood. He understood that, and he knew it from certain studies, with primates, when we knew that monkeys, rhesus monkeys separated from their mothers, often died too. And so he made the correct correlation that anybody with a mammal brain, that's based on bonding, if we don't get those early bonds, the brain simply checks out. And we need love is as important as air, water, food, and protection. All of that. Now, Bowlby, it's interesting, is when he was a little child, he came from very well-to-do British parents. And it wasn't until he was 12 that he was even allowed to have dinner with his mom and dad. And then only dessert. And he had a certain nanny that pretty much substituted for mom that he really bonded with. So long as you get the resources from somewhere, it doesn't have to come from the biologicals. But something happened between the nanny and the parents at 5, and they fired that nanny. And the loss of that primal relationship, the one he really bonded with, he resented. And from the memoirs of his wife after his death, he never forgave them for that. So he knew firsthand the pain of losing a parent early. Because that nanny was, for all intents and purposes, mom. And I think that's what really let him know why these children were dying without parents, because he understood the pain.
Very interesting. And that used to be, I remember when I was growing up, that was kind of a common saying back then, is children are to be seen, not heard. And I think, and that was somewhat the British way, and it was probably in some other areas where children were kind of separated from their parents for a period of time there. And I don't know why that occurred, because in most other cultures, that is not the case. But for whatever reason, the British did it, and they did rule the world at one point.
It's interesting. This is a distinctly, I wouldn't say it's distinctly, but in America, we have this whole myth of the self-actualized individual. We have the myth of radical individualism, right? Bowlby's student, Dr. Mary Ainsworth, wanted to study effects of bonding, right? And she went to Uganda and watched mothers there who, man, for the first 3 years, that baby is pretty much strapped on their back or right in front, and the baby is always spending time with them. And noticed that there was, occasionally there wasn't, but there's these children grew up to be very secure and loving and all these things and well-adjusted and emotionally strong. Now this was what was interesting. When she came to the States, she did something called the Baltimore study. And she replicated that. But here in America, there was no breastfeeding rules at that time, right? Separate what you're talking about. There was more cultural norms. And that was when she really found out that there were 3 basic styles. There were the secure, but there were far more babies who were anxious or avoidant because they were not given a secure style. And that style that we can know as early as 10 months to 18 months, it's called the strained situation. That style will track for the rest of their life, barring intervention. And we know that they can either be comfortable, loving, and being loved. That's called secure. They can be afraid, when is love going to go away? How do I lock it down? Where were you last night? Why didn't you text me? They become more drama. Those become anxious. And they tend to drive their partners away as adults. And then there's the avoidance, the ones that check out. They're emotionally dismissive. They Mr. Ms. unavailable or not commit. And that's how they track. So the funny thing is some of those cultural things do come back to haunt us. And we're just now getting to the place where we're undoing, I think, some of the effects of the 50s and 60s when we did not know what we should have known about babies.
It's funny because we didn't do this knowing the research, but when our kids were young, they essentially slept in our bed. And even as they were a little bit older, we would always put them to bed and spend an inordinate amount of time kind of hugging them and making them feel safe. And so they always grew up very secure, so that like when they went off to preschool and into kindergarten, we never had those crying tantrums of, oh my God, you're leaving me, that kind of stuff. Somebody was from our family was always, because we lived in multi-generational families. So somebody was always home. Somebody was always holding the baby or there for them. And so I think they essentially got that type of safety as kids. And again, we didn't do it purposely in the sense of knowing the reasons behind it. We just did it because culturally, that's kind of more what we did. It worked out well.
Originally, we're programmed to raise children in a village. It's called alloparenting, is the technical term, other parenting, where in a village, mom doesn't, there are no latchkey kids because there's lots of moms and parents and aunts and uncles and grandmothers to watch. If that mom gets sick or she's got to go do something, someone's there to fill in. But then we had this idea, we will take women, separate them from that supportive environment, put them in all by themselves in a home, from 7 in the morning till 6 at night when the hubby comes back. This is called the 50s. And then wonder why things broke down, right? Children are time and emotional intensive. It takes a lot of resources. And it sounds like you had a beautiful example of that in your family.
Well, it sounds like people should go talk to their mothers and fathers about what was life like when I was a little baby and how much, time was spent in that. Because today, I think a lot of people, 6 to 8 weeks later, they're in daycare for some people. And I know for us, my daughter never slept in a crib. There was a crib in my son's room, and literally the kids used to call it jail because that's literally what it looks like, a little jail cell. And they never, ever spent any time in it. And that was kind of what it was nicknamed. It was kind of funny, but that's what society does.
Yeah, there have been some studies to show, and we want to give no guilt trips here by any means. Sometimes it's not possible, especially if a single mother is doing the best she can of putting food over the table. But there is a difference when below 2 being put into some sort of sustained child care and after 2. There's a huge difference. There's a big difference in emotional stability. And the reason, and like we were talking before, your children went to school. That's called a secure, and they didn't overreact. They didn't calm, they were calmer. Because when children are given that beautiful feeling of cherished and protected, that means that, the parent is there. It's called a secure base. You can explore knowing that the parent's around. They've got your back. You get separation and supervision. Now that comes in later as a right to have a really great we in a relationship for couples. But when they get that, they internalize the protectiveness of the child. It's with this feeling of I'm cherishable. And when you internalize it, you take the safety with you. Now, if you haven't been given you that, then you internalize threat. And that's and if you've got internal threat going on, then children don't calm down as fast. They do get into different tantrum scenarios because some part is objecting to the lack of protection. This is why it's so important that all of us feel cherished and protected. It's one of those 4 core feelings I talk about in the book that tell us we're loved. You've got to feel welcome with joy, worthy and nourished, cherished and protected and empowered with choice. That's your brain. You feel those 4 feelings, you feel loved. And when you feel loved, you calm down, and then your children act just like you're talking about. And when they don't, they throw tantrums or other things.
Fun stuff. I remember those days. I'm glad they're long gone.
Yes. No, most of us would not, especially junior high. Let us never go back to that time.
So the book is called Safe to Love Again, How to Release the Pain of Past Relationships and Create the Love You Deserve. Why did you write the book?
Well, I wrote the book. Well, there's two reasons. Once I committed myself to really cracking the code, it wasn't until after my second divorce. Between the first divorce and the second divorce, I had after all those degrees, I said, then I'm going to do therapy. And I did 7.5 years of therapy. Then I got into another marriage and it still fell apart. And then afterwards, there's several broken relationships. And I began to notice that although therapy had done me a lot of good, it still had not changed my core style of relating, except it was a little worse. Now I was so afraid of divorce, I was showing up as Mr. Wrong. Or I was picking Ms. Wrong, one or the other. And it was at that point that I said, nobody should have to work this hard at having a lasting love and to get the results that I had. And so I dedicated my life. I said, if they can't crack the code, then I will. And it became my life's purpose. And after, I really began to crack that code with these 4 feelings that I'm talking about in the book that are so essential. You have to feel them in your gut. It can't be thinking I'm worthy. You have to know, feel it in your guts. And you have to feel cherished and you have to feel empowered. Now, when you have that, then when I was doing workshops or working with clients, I think the big two was when a clinical psychologist who came to one of my workshops just for his own self, not as a therapist, just as for his own self and love. He walked up afterwards and said, this is groundbreaking. It's new. You made me a better therapist this weekend. And if you don't write the book, his exact words were, it's a sin against the guild. And I said, well, we wouldn't want to honk off any deities now, would we? And then I had one client said, Gary, you've got to write this. If you don't, and you don't write it before you die, I swear I'm going to haunt you on the other side. And I realized how many people needed the book. So when I knew it was groundbreaking and life-changing, I spent about 3 years writing, editing, and getting the book out.
And I'm very glad you did, because there is a lot of great information in there.
Yes. And if there's anything I hope, there's a lot of good information. It's written for normal people. My big goal in the book was to write a book so that when people walked away, they not only knew what love felt like, what love was, but they could give them a new reference feeling for what love is. Because if they can feel differently about love, they'll choose differently. Most of us choose the old feelings. So my true goal was when people would walk away, if they had never known what it's like to feel loved, they would know deep in their heart, this is what it feels like to be loved. If I could get that, you can't do all the deep work I do one-on-one in a book, but if I could give that and give them a roadmap to how they can have that same feeling back and their relationships become lasting and loving, I did my job.
So let's dig into some of the stories that were in the book, because I found quite a few of them very interesting.
Mm.
The first one is the story of Paul. Now, Paul got divorced later in life because he was anxious, and yet he had something in his mind. When he was 4, he was beaten by his father. Can you share what happened there and that story? Because I thought that was intriguing.
I mean, I've heard some really good stories, but I'd have to say that was the one that absolutely taught me a lot sitting in the chair. Paul came to me, a very sincere man in his 40s, twice divorced. And he didn't understand why he was twice divorced, because as he told the story, he says, I come from mom and dad have been married 53 years. My brother and sister, older brother and sister, were both married 20 and 25 years. Everybody's got a secure love style. He had read a little bit about attachment. He says, except for me. He says, and I've gotten anxious. And he said to me, look, I've had this fear of when will love turn against me? That was his phrase. It's really important to know that phrase. When will love turn against me? And he says, the point is, I mistrusted 2 women, and both of my marriages ended about 10 years because they got tired of me mistrusting. He says, the sad thing is I actually created the very thing I feared, that love would turn against me, and it did. And I want to know why, because my parents, for the most part, have been world-class parents. Everybody's got secure styles. And then there's me, the anomaly. So we work with that. And the phrase, when does love turn on? I said, where? And we track that feeling back to when he was 4 years old and the family was at a campfire. And the way he tells it, he says, for no good reason. I don't know why it happened. It never happened before. It never happened again. My father turned on me. There's your phrase. Turned on me and beat me. He beat me for no good reason. And ever since then, I've been looking out for the day that love turns on me. He says, and I don't know why he did it that day. It never happened before. And every other respect, he was a model father. So we work with that's what he gives me. The real shocker came a few months later when he comes to one of my workshops, and his older brother comes just as support. I mean, I got the meeting before. He says, I'm just here to support. I've got a great marriage. And they were sitting on the front row. And on Saturday afternoon, I'm asking for shares. And Paul gets up and shares about this story, about the campfire, the day his father turned on him. And as I'm watching him share, I can see his brother, his jaw is literally dropping to the floor. And I'm going, wow. That's an interesting reaction his brother's having. And then all of a sudden, his brother interrupts and says, Paul, that's why you're so screwed up? Although he did use another term at the time. He says, you got it all wrong. And this is where it really gets interesting. He says, I was 9. You were 4. You got too close to the campfire and your pant legs caught on fire. Dad wasn't turning on you. He was keeping you from being turned into a marshmallow. And they just looked at each other for about 40 seconds, the most shocked look on Paul's face you could ever imagine as to what his brain created as an experience inside his head and what actually happened. And you could have heard a pin drop. People go, oh. And then I said, so this goes to show you the difference between experience that your brain makes up. All of us, our brains are making up experience and actually what happened. So it shows us the difference that when people say, well, this is my truth, this is how I remember, the brain's kind of a crapshoot back there as to what it's going to make up. It's not using logical deduction. It deletes a lot. It doesn't notice a lot. It deletes and it notices some things maybe more than it should. And what Paul had was an anxious experience. Life was a little different, but it doesn't matter. Our job was to go in and help his brain create a secure experience. But experience is what your brain makes up of life. And if you're out there listening, you just want to notice that your truth may not be the truth. That's the key.
And I think that was another aha for us. Like, my kids are now late in their teenage years. Mm-hmm. And when we have conversations about when they were young, they really don't remember the events. But I think what they do remember is the feelings that they had and the ability to be strong. And strong is not the right word, but I remember when my daughter was she was probably her 2nd birthday, and she loved Barney. So Barney came to the party. Mm. Well, Barney's 6 feet tall and purple.
Yes.
Every kid ran away except for one, my daughter, who was perfectly fine hugging Barney. She knew she was safe. She doesn't remember Barney from that party, but I think what she remembers is the safety. And so now she's strong. I mean, she's off doing her own thing and she's got chutzpah. But I think that's where it came from.
That's called a secure base. It's part of what's under cherished. If a child learns that the parent is a protective, supportive we, they internalize it. They know that and they internalize that safety. And what it does, it allows children to go out and explore. That's an exploring moment. Who is this big guy that's 6 foot and purple? Oh, it's Barney. It's safe to explore. When children don't get that secure base, when the we doesn't, with them and the parent does not feel supportive, does not feel protective, and they have to do it on their own, that's when the fortresses go and go, well, I better not, without a backup, without a we, I better not explore very much. I better pull back. What allows great explorers is to know you've got backup. That experience of a secure base. If you think about it, how many times have you seen people that were willing to risk because a parent or a spouse said, you want to go quit your job and get another degree and really do what you love? I got your back. That's a secure base. And every great couple has that same feeling. When she goes into a couple situation, Rocky, she's got that as her reference feeling. She's more likely to pick a man who will give her that feeling because her brain knows she's got a right to feel cherished and protected. And she's not going to find somebody that won't give her that. So, and then she'll be able to give it, and the we will feel like a great place. That reference feeling is what is actually of cherished and protected. When I do work with couples, that feeling that you're describing as Barney is actually the feeling that makes most couples. And without it, you got two me's. So you've given her a beautiful gift of being able to create a we and to be able to explore her best potential, just cleverly disguised as Barney in purple.
Absolutely. We'll be back with Dr. Salyer in a moment. Wow, our subconscious brains can really be screwed up, and sometimes we really need to change the way we look at life. I'm not an expert in psychology, and if you need help, like Paul did, to uncover and reprogram your thoughts, find the person who's best suited for you. So, who has your back? I help business owners focus on profit so they can use it as a fuel to the life of their dreams. When you have excess money, you can use it to solve your business problems and to live life on your terms. We have to be holistic, and in today's world of niching down on everything, we get stuck in tunnel vision. I help small business owners focus on the forest instead of the trees, with actionable steps they can take today and accountability, as well as helping them change the lens that they look at their problems through. If you're ready to take your small business to the next level and want to have someone who has your back, reach out and we can schedule a short chat to see if we're a good fit. It's Rocky@richersoul.com. Let's get back to our amazing conversation with Dr. Salyer and hear some more interesting stories about how we can change ourselves. There was another one, and this was Daniel. And Daniel seemed like he was always getting cut off in life, and I think he even got cut off driving to your office one day, and he was mad about that. What was up with Daniel?
Well, Daniel was an IT guy. I think late 30s, kind of middle management. We worked in IT, and he was always talking about being cut off. The funny thing was, he did come in this one day, and it wasn't like the highway that led to my house at the time wasn't known for that. It was actually a horrible one. He was coming over from San Francisco, and that stretch of road was not good. And he said, "Man, I got cut off." And at first, you just let your client kvetch a little bit there, and then he goes, "I'm getting cut off at work. I'm getting cut off from this promotion. I should be the one. And I don't get the promotions and I don't get the raises. I'm getting cut off from there." And then he looks, he says, "I'm even getting cut off at home too. The sex isn't so great." His whole world was coming around this phrase, built around a phrase, cut off. And it struck me that it was so many different places that I realized that what looked like small talk was not actually small talk. And I've learned that over the years, too. Whenever clients come in the first 10 minutes, it looks like small talk. It almost never is. Some part is ratting out what needs to be dealt with, so to speak. And when we looked at that cutoff, we found out that there was a incident when he was a child that he was at school, and there was this much longed for prize. There were like 10 of them, and he was the first 10 people get it. And I think he was like 8 at the time, was he? Maybe 9. And he was the 10th one. He was going to get it. And a teacher who wanted another child to have it said, you have to let this person in front of you. So the mold became, and he felt cut off. So the mold for experience was ways I can get cut off. Now, the funny thing is he either chose situations, people that would give it, or he would create it, or he would just project it. The interesting thing is at work, when we gave him back that full right to create his experience, and that he was worthy, then he was able to ask for a raise, and he actually got it. And the funny thing was he felt cut off in his marriage of 15 years. The shock of his life was finding out his wife actually wanted to make love to him more. And there was a little projection there, because that feeling of cut off was what his brain kind of equated with survival. And when we allowed him to have more of a right to create his own experience so he could be empowered, and more of a right to feel worthy, and we placed cut off with, being included in a supportive we, then he could belong in an organization called IT, that actually rewarded him, made him feel worthy, that allowed him to speak up and ask for raises, empowered him. And of course, at work, at home, he got a way better marriage, because she was thinking, gosh, I've wanted that too. So when you upgrade the feelings of like worthy and just empowered and cherished, it affected everything. That's why I say that love is the operating system. It started actually in school, and it affected love, and then it went elsewhere. It just walked up and grew legs. If you change that core feeling, everything changes, including business.
And I think that's very important to understand. It's how you do one thing is kind of how you do all things. And if you feel like you're cut off in love, then you're feeling like you're cut off everywhere else in life. And actually, I think the next story really hits home to that, which is Stephanie. She runs a 7-figure business, and it seems like every time there's trouble, her boyfriends take off, and every time there's trouble at work, her workers are ghosting her. So what was Stephanie's issue, and how did she resolve it?
In the book, there were 4 women who came to me in 1 year, who all with this missing right to split right to separate and belong. All of them learned early in childhood, way better to be a me than a we, way more right to separate than to belong. And now these women, and Stephanie was one, they were all 7-figure coaches. So worthy was not their problem. They earned 7 figures in their business. But with Stephanie, and I zeroed in on her as an example of that, in her business, in her relationships, she told me about the guy that she was moving, and the guy goes off and goes on his own little vacation and comes in after the move, says, "Oh, is there nothing to be done? Oh, I'm so sorry." And men would just not show up for her. With the one married gal in that group, he just wasn't always as understanding about what she needed. And I can still, so when we swap that out, suddenly she's now with men who want to be there for her, who when she wants to move are going to be there and will actually show up and pack boxes and move boxes. And she now gets a better boyfriend. Then the day came to me she was about 6 sessions into it, was it? And she goes, "Hey, I have an idea." She goes, "I have a staff of 7 people. And she goes, I can only count on 2 of them. 5 of them will flake on me. If I have a big project or a big launch, suddenly they're out of town." She goes, "I've got one this week, and my website designer and somebody and my marketing person are gone. They just took off. They knew they had it." She goes, they feel to me just like my old boyfriends. Is there any correlation? And of course I said, Yahtzee, bingo. That's that same template that the brain uses, that early template for love. Whatever the rights are, if we have a right to be properly supported or not, to be a me and a we, to reach out and have our needs met, or to feel empowered. And it will just swap it out for other experiences. So the big thing that I've noticed over the years, Rocky, is, and this is almost a staggering statistic, of all the women who had their own businesses, most of them entrepreneurs, there have been no exceptions. All of them worked on love and got a better business in the process. There have been no exceptions. The same templates their brain used to create a relationship, they used to create business relationships. So the best way to work on your life, your business, is actually work on love, to be honest with you. Because everything that's a problem in business, almost 85, 90% of the chance I can, when people have come to me for that, bingo, it goes back to something that happened that they learned in early relationships, which I call attachment.
And I've always said that when you have success in one area of your life, it rolls over into other areas of your life. So if you lose weight, you start to gain money. If you start to gain money, you can start to lose weight. Like, all of these different things go together. And as you have success in one area, it rolls to success in another area. So that begs the question, how does someone learn to love and be loved fully?
That's a good question, Rocky. And it's more than just learning. One of the things, part of the thing that when I went through my undergraduate, I learned a lot about psychology. I learned a lot about marriage and family. We went over skills and things like that. It still didn't give me the feelings to give to my wife. This is what our brain's natural GPS from the time we're one. Remember, the book argues, and pretty persuasively, is that we must all feel welcomed with joy in a relationship, worthy and nourished, cherished and protected, and empowered with choice. Now, if you have any other feeling, unworthy or unwelcome or uncherished or disempowered, you will not only seek that, but you'll find a way to give it, because we can only give what we have. Let me explain the difference between just giving skills and learning versus doing real transformation, which is changing things at a cellular feeling level. My sister and I, my sister is 3.5 years younger than me. We both had the same third grade teacher. And I didn't hear about this story till I was in my 20s and I was speaking at an event. And there was my third grade teacher, retired by now, grinning at me, right? I hadn't seen her much since I was 10. But I was always teacher's pet. I loved science and all that stuff even back then. And when she got Kim, she thought, wow, I have the same thing. I'm going to have another Gary. Now, but she said, this was the event that told me I didn't. See, my sister, unlike me, I separated from my mother, but she took after my mother. And my mother was borderline. My mother was kind of emotionally hostile almost all the time. That's just the way she rolled in life. Her motto was, around her, you get hot tongue and a cold shoulder, which is another way, I guess, metaphorically saying, I'm not going to welcome you with joy in the life. And she didn't welcome very many people with joy. The day came when Mrs. Graham always would have people come in and visit, maybe science people, and she would have someone knock on the door and be a greeter. So the day came, she asked my sister to greet. And my sister goes, well, how's that work? She goes, and she showed her, went up and says, well, you open the door and you very politely, you look them in the eye and go, well, come in. So the day came. Later that day, the hour came. Knock on the door. Mrs. Graham looks at my sister. My sister gets up. Now, she's been taught the skill set, right? And she opens the door and she goes, well, come in. Not exactly welcoming. She had the skill set, but not the feeling to give. And I see this so often with couples that it's learning skills, but if we don't give them restore the feelings to the loving ones, they will find a way to they will practice the skill set, but it won't land well because it's not got the feelings. You got to have both. learning plus emotional transformation.
So how do we know where we are in our relationships? How can we tell if they're healthy, need a little work, or if we're in major trouble?
Okay, I point out that since you're one, the brain uses these 4 core feelings as its GPS for love, based on a lot of things that's pretty well laid out. Now, if you really want, this is what I teach my couples every Sunday. A really couple, or you can use it as singles. If you've gone out on a few dates, ask yourself this about the guy or the gal you're dating after 3 or 4 dates. Either way, this is your new GPS for love. If you're a couple, you can say, honey, this week on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did I make you feel welcome with joy? Scale of 1 to 10, how well did you feel worthy and nourished? Scale of 1 to 10, how cherished and protected did I help you feel? Scale of 1 to 10, how empowered with choice? And anything under a 9, you simply say, then what could I have done to have made it a 10? Now, the other person can't get into criticism. They can say, well, there were 3 or 4 nights at supper that you were more into your cell phone than us and the family, and I didn't feel very welcomed. Or there was that I wanted to discuss with you my feelings the other night, and you said, oh no, are you playing victim again? And instead of listening to my feelings, I felt shut down. I didn't feel empowered. Oh, and then you know exactly. If couples can do that, or if you're single, after a few days, how welcome do I feel? How worthy, how cherished, how empowered? If you can use that, then you have a pretty good idea. If you're in a relationship and one of those feelings is I'd say 7 or under, that's an issue. Okay. If one of those feelings and the other 3 are usually there, it's a decent relationship. You probably are thinking there's things we could work on, maybe a workshop. 2 of these feelings are missing. They almost always are the ones you missed in childhood, by the way. They almost always track back because it's a permissionless thing. If you 2, then you're thinking, gosh, what's the number of my therapist, or my best friend's therapist? And then if 3 or 4 are missing, you're in a toxic relationship that either needs to get fixed or you need to leave, because it does real damage to our souls and our brains when we live with unwelcomed and unworthy and uncherished and disempowered. In fact, research tells us that the opposite of cherish is contempt. When there's contempt in a relationship, it predicts the downfall of a relationship within 7 years at 94%. So feelings are huge, and just check in with each other. If you're dating, use it as your litmus test to know, is this Mr. Right or Ms. Right? One single woman had told me, beginning working, I just hit the jackpot. And the jackpot was a guy 6'2". He was an attorney, he was a doctor, and, he did Pilates and he did yoga. Turned out after a few weeks, he was always hitting on women, when he was doing yoga with her. Not much cherished, not much worthy. When we install these feelings, the rightful feelings, she didn't feel welcome. She didn't feel cherished. She didn't feel worthy in life. When we give her back those reference feelings, now she dates 2 guys, and one guy's another jackpot guy, except he's an attorney. And the other guy is a guy he's got a good job, but he's got a little balding. He's a little overweight. He comes in with a Hawaiian shirt, but he makes her feel great. She chooses him. Then now she feels loved. This is how it goes in life. We use these feelings to know when we're loved and we're not loved. And that turns out we can also use those for couples so they can get a pretty good diagnosis of what went wrong that week and how to fix it.
One of the things I learned from Daniel Pink was when you give the 1 to 10 scale, if you want to sell them, and let's just say they give you a 7, instead of asking what you can do to be a 10, ask why they didn't pick 6.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't read by Daniel. Why they didn't pick 6?
Say, why didn't you pick 6? And so then they start to tell you the positive things. So it's building together instead of building apart.
Yeah, in a normal sales conversation, I would say that. But if you're working with a couple, you want to find out what's going on.
Yes, you do. That's not more for you. That's more for couples if they want to start building together themselves, is to at least taking it from negative to positive. That's all.
And, there's one little skill that I teach. It's called, it's a feedback wheel. So you can also say, well, what I appreciated is that on Monday and Tuesday, you were really present and asked questions. And what I'd like to see more of is less talking on the phone and more connecting with us. That's another way of, adding, because you're right. There's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative that must be present even during conflict. That's research with couples. And so that's a feeling of worthy, by the way. So 5-to-1 ratio, positive, negative, anything under 50%, that couple's in real hurt. It's the essence of the marital friendship. And what I know in working with couples, that whatever the presenting problem is, if the marital friendship, these 4 feelings are hurting, you can't solve the problem because 2 enemies do not compromise well. But if we can get that positivity back up, restore these feelings, and get the marital friendship up, now compromise and solving the problem is way better. Positivity, like you're talking, is actually the WD-40 oil for most relationships. It allows that key to unlock things a lot better. If you ever had a frozen lock and you tried to force that key in the door, it's not going to work. If you put some WD-40 oil of positivity, like you're talking, suddenly you can unlock things a lot better. So I love that. It tells me why your daughters and your children feel so loved.
We've been touching on this, but we haven't dug into it. How do we transform ourselves?
There's a couple things. Knowing that there's an epidemic of unworthiness out there. And there's so many things, ghosting and, breakups for no good reason, for mere fear of somebody missing out, the divorce rate, and to know that you're worthy. You're worthy of lasting love. So many people feel unworthy. They won't even reach out for help. I want you to know that these rights I talk about, you were born with. The amoeba does not ask, do I have a right to reach out and get nutrients? It just does. Your lungs don't ask, I wonder if I deserve air today. Your body automatically takes in air because it knows it's worthy. And so are you of love. And the other thing, too, is it takes a community. To do the deep work, you can't do this work just by yourself. That's a split right to separate and belong. You actually, to do the deep work, to do the transformation, you read books, you get better, but you also need to have a supportive community of friends who have secure love styles, not the jaded ones, and you need a good trusted guide, a therapist, somebody who understands how to reset these rights. Nobody can do them by themselves. So it's a matter of seeking the proper support and allowing it in.
Well, thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you wanted to share on the subject of living a loving and more meaningful life, but didn't get a chance to?
There is one other thing, and that is, I know we live in an age where there's a 50% divorce rate, and there's a lot of hopelessness out there because our brain kept picking the old thing over and over again. And what I know is if you feel hopeless about your chances of finding love, after you've had enough heartache, the brain has a funny little remedy and solution for it. It begins to delete all the possibilities for love, and just to protect you from it ever going south. So I know that hopelessness is a filter that some part of the brain has adopted to delete all the possibilities. So to protect. But if we can change these feelings at the core of your brain so you're picking and choosing and creating and maintaining relationships, then we can swap out that old filter of hopelessness. Because hopelessness is a filter. And to show you the possibilities of love that are already there. So your heart can open up. So just know that you're worthy of love and that real love, not false hope, but real hope does exist. And when you are worthy and you have hope with a few more different feelings and some skills, lasting love can do yours.
Thank you for sharing that. Based on our conversation today, what's one action step people can take this week to move forward?
I tell you, one step that they can take is to just make themselves a little filter. I call it a perceptual filter. Ways, and I would start right here, ways I can notice I am worthy of love. Most people are in that camp. About 85% of women. Now, if you felt like one of these other feelings, I've never felt welcomed, I never felt cherished, I never felt empowered in a relationship, or that's what my last few have been like, then you can substitute ways I can notice all the ways I can feel welcomed or worthy or empowered. Whatever the missing feeling is, ways I can notice all the ways I can feel blank that feeling, right? And just and pull that out. Little card, notice it about 4 times a day, especially before you go to bed at night. And that might be a really good way of noticing the possibilities that your brain's deleted. It's kind of like, when you say, I'm going to go out and buy a car, you say, I'm going to buy a Volvo, you suddenly start seeing all the Volvos that you didn't see before. So that's one really good way. Simple, very simple. It's not the deep work, but it's a good way of beginning to notice that there are possibilities for love that you haven't seen.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant, loving life?
I think gratitude's noticing all the good things. I lived most of my life feeling I was separate. I had to pull myself up from my bootstraps. And an abundant life is lived with support. I am amazed on the other side of all this work, how many people wanted to support me. How many people are there, not only in terms of my business, having coaching and all that, but it's an abundant universe because we live in a cosmic we. There's so many people that want to support us. And if we support others, they'll support us. So it really comes down as being grateful and willing to let the universe show up for us.
It's amazing what happens when you open up to the universe. It provides you the things that you need. Maybe not what you want, but what you need when you need it.
Absolutely.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
If I could go back to my former self, I think I'd say 2 things. The early Gary learned that he was only valid in life if he were smart. And I would let him know, Gary, you are enough just as you are. That whatever intellect you were given as a gift, it's not who you are, son. I would love to have said that, especially the 20 and 25 and 30-year-old Gary, 35-year-old, and that you're enough. You're enough to be loved just as you are. You don't have to prove anything. That's what I would like to say.
And that is the one theme that comes across in a multitude of episodes, is just the concept of I am enough. And when you realize that you are enough, everything else just kind of flows. And so this last question is kind of in line, but what one piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think there's another piece too, is when you're always doing things by yourself, risk. I didn't risk a lot, and I didn't depend on others a lot, but risk. In fact, there was a turning point in my business where my best friend, who was an organizational psychologist, pointed out to me some years ago, Gary, you can't build a business. You never take a risk if you don't start taking some risk in life. And I had to learn to trust that universe. And it was amazing when I began to make, not stupid risk, but I began to risk. The universe just showed up in all sorts of ways. So I learned to follow my guts with all that and to really trust my guts. I think good risk.
Like you said, calculated risks, but it's basically getting out of your shell and trying something new. It's not the risk of, you don't bet it all on one thing. You take calculated risks and you put yourself out there. And for a lot of people, putting themselves out there is a risk, but it's not a risk that really has a downside other than someone says no. but you've got to do it.
And what I did find is that the risk of not taking risk was even greater.
It is much greater because you end up with a life of regrets.
You do. Absolutely. It's good to play full out.
If people would like to find you and connect, where is the best place for them to do that?
Well, my website, www.GarySalyer, GarySalyer.com. That's where you can contact me if you ever wanted to look at some one-on-one time with me. My book's there. There's something called Love Notes where people can sign up for a series of videos that help couples and singles find more love. They're 2 to 4 minutes. I actually had a couple tell me they signed up, they listened, both of them twice divorced in their 50s, and listening to Love Notes, believe it or not, they reached out on Facebook. They told me that those Love Notes changed the way they related in engagement. And then I got to see the pictures of them getting married in Paris. The website, it's got everything, GarySalyer.com.
And I will put a link to it in the show notes to make it easy for everyone to find it. And I encourage them to do so. And I very much enjoyed reading the book and having the opportunity to have the conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rocky. It's been an honor. And thank you so much.
What are the stories you are telling yourself? Are they true? Are they real? Do you have misconceptions like Paul? Do the patterns in one part of your life bleed into the other parts of your life, like Stephanie? This week's action step was to ask yourself multiple times a day, ways I can notice I am worthy of love, or whatever feeling it is that you want to work on. Asking ourselves these questions throughout the day can help us overcome ourselves. And that's really the key. I'm always amazed at how much our childhood beliefs drive our adult behaviors. The way to transform them is first to be aware and then to question them. It takes time, and having help can bring those changes faster. If you need help with love, check out Dr. Salyer's work at GarySalyer.com, and I'll put this link in the show notes. Also, we do need to take risks in life, but you also need to have risk management. Leap with a parachute. One of the biggest obstacles to love is being afraid to risk asking someone out for fear of rejection. As Dr. Salyer said, the biggest risk is not taking risk. Who wants to have a life of regrets of love and the life you could have lived because you were afraid to ask? If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode. So please share it with a few friends. It can start a great conversation, and I'd appreciate your sharing. You can also connect with me on Facebook, and there's a Facebook page and a Facebook group for Richer Soul. In the Facebook group, you can actually tell me some of the questions you'd like to have me ask the guests in the future. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.